With as good as this movie is, but with its many plot holes, could you imagine how much better it would be if they just did a couple more drafts? This is a review of The First Omen, written by Tim Smith, Arkancha Stevenson, and Keith Thomas, directed by Arkancha Stevenson. We have a young American woman who is devoted to her faith, moving to Italy to work with nuns and help the nuns take care of people who may not be able to care for themselves. Along the way, she befriends another woman who is also devoted or seemingly devoted to her faith, but has had a history that is just as fun as it is traumatic. And at the place where this young American woman works at and lives at, she learns that there is a darkness lurking, and a lot of the nuns are in on it, and it involves the birth of an otherworld being. Now, I am talking about Immaculate, but when it comes to The First Omen, you could probably use the exact same description. For these two very similar movies to only be a couple weeks apart is kind of strange, and I'm sure the people that worked on The First Omen doing a lot of work, I'm sure, to get the rights to make The First Omen. It's probably frustrating to then have Immaculate come out just before, considering that the stories are very similar. Yes, we have another installment in the Omen franchise. This is actually an origin story or a prequel, and I had a good time. It's not that bad. I think this movie actually has one of the best trailers I've seen in a while. This is good directing by Stevenson, and the first Omen is probably one of the most stylistic approaches in the Catholic horror genre. Even though I knew where a lot of things were going and I could see how the movie was going to end for the most part, I did like the setup. It was a pretty good setup, even though it was a slow build or a build up that a lot of people would consider boring. And I initially thought felt that way, but as time passed and I was able to really sulk and marinate on the movie, I think it did pretty good with setting up, a decent job at setting up. And I'm wanting to be careful with how I describe this movie because there are a lot of plot holes, and there is even an unnecessary club scene that I think was there for the sake of plot convenience. And as time goes on, I start questioning, how is this possible if this is the case? It did not connect exactly with the Omen franchise in the sense of what we are told in the Omen, the original Omen. And it kind of tries to do a shift that does not work for me. However, we do add some new elements to the Omen lore that I think could potentially work well, or things that were not mentioned before. And if they were, I do not remember. I mean, Damien is given a twin here. I like the fresh take. I like the way this movie looks. Again, it's stylistic. And I would say this is a movie I think horror fans would enjoy for the most part. I think some people will be entertained, especially if you're into Catholic horror. I'm not a huge fan of it, but I can appreciate it for the most part. We have yet to have a Catholic horror movie that's able to match the OGs of The Exorcist, The Omen, Black Narcissus, probably a couple others I'm not thinking of. I think The Conjuring comes the closest to being recognized as a movie that would be up there. And in the past 10 months, we've had four big religious horror films: The Nun 2, Exorcist Believer, both of those being absolute garbage. And then we have Immaculate and The First Omen, both of which are pretty good movies. And I didn't leave upset or disappointed. Until next time, y'all take care of each other, check up on one another, make sure you check up on yourself, and remember, potential has no limit.